Great. So we can go ahead and get started. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is the third of our four-part webinar series, Stabilize to Thrive. And before we go into the webinar, I wanted to give a brief introduction to SBIDC for everyone on the call. We can go to the next slide. SBIDC was founded in 1978 to support industrial businesses in Sunset Park, Gowanus, and Red Hook. And our mission is to further the success of the working waterfront in Brooklyn, helping industrial manufacturing businesses succeed and grow, creating well-paying jobs for local residents, and proudly continuing the tradition of high-quality products made right here in Brooklyn. And towards these ends, we provide a range of services to industrial businesses, from financing assistance to help with government incentives and regulations, to connections on real estate searches, the topic we're going to be talking about a little more today. SBIDC also runs the Brooklyn Workforce One Industrial and Transportation Career Center, where we provide free recruitment services for industrial businesses and help to place interested job seekers with these businesses. We also do a substantial amount of engagement on policy issues relevant to industrial businesses, and work to preserve industrial space at the city and state policy levels. My name is Brady Mikesell, and I'm the Economic Development Specialist here at SBIDC. And I handle our navigating government services, providing assistance to industrial businesses with city, state, and federal incentives, discussions with city agencies, permitting and regulatory compliance. And I also handle our side of things on the real estate services side. So facilitating connections for businesses to available industrial spaces for lease and sale in the IBC, and connecting you with real estate brokers and attorneys. And I'm going to put my email in the chat here just in case, if you have any kind of assistance needed on any of those services, don't hesitate to reach out. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Michaela Skochnik, for her to give an introduction as well.
Thank you, Brady. Hi, everyone. My name is Michaela Skopnic. I am the Industrial Programs Manager with SBIDC. I handle mostly the financing assistance cases from businesses, so connecting folks to banks, CDFIs, also handling several other inquiries that businesses might have. I also do a bit of work around policy and advocacy that we do here at SBIDC, so I'm glad that my colleague Ryan Cagle from BOC Network has joined the call. We are part of several different coalitions across the city that try to bring together industrial support organizations. So working on different topics, on policy topics, and trying to protect and preserve industrial businesses in Brooklyn. So yeah, back to you, Brady. Thank you guys for being with us today. Excited to be hosting this webinar and very looking forward to the conversation on leasing and what do you need to strengthen your position.
And we're excited to be joined today here by Justin Waiser of William A. Slutsky PC and Rich Novak of Cushman & Wakefield. Both have been really great resources for our businesses here in Southwest Brooklyn, and having worked in recent months on several leasing deals. So we're glad to have them both here with us today to speak about the state of the local industrial market, and also how to assemble the right team for an industrial lease process. This will be the first SBIDC webinar with Rich and Justin, but we're planning to do a few additional events in the coming months to continue this conversation going forward. So this is hopefully the first of a few. I'll turn it over then to Justin and Rich to start the discussion.
Okay, Rich, I think you're muted.
Yeah, Rich is on mute. Justin, we can hear you.
Fantastic.
All right, Rich, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself first?
Yep. So hi, everybody. Rich Novak with Cushman & Wakefield. I'm an industrial and office leasing broker with a core focus on Brooklyn, but we handle anything and everything in the New York State and city markets and the outer boroughs. Kind of mainly been focusing on the industrial product in the last few years, since it has been the place to focus on due to the pandemic and everything that's happening. But I work on a team of 9 or 10 folks right now, And we work, I believe we have like 8 to 10 million square feet of space on the office side throughout the borough in various projects and a few industrial assets as well. One of which is the Brooklyn Army Terminal right in this neighborhood that I've been running leasing for the EDC is our client there. So I've been running leasing at the Brooklyn Army Terminal for the last 2.5 years. So done quite a bit of new leases and expansions and renewals there over the past few years. I've been at Cushman for 3 years. Prior to that, I was at a more mid-market Brooklyn-centric firm for 5 years. And then prior to that, I had a separate career in television and film. Before it's transitioning over into commercial real estate. But yeah, looking forward to getting into it all. And Justin, if you want to take it from there.
Sure. So hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Justin Waiser, and I'm a partner in the law firm of William A. Slutsky, PC. We're a small firm. We're based in Forest Hills. We have an office in Manhattan. We do a mix of a number of things. We represent smaller businesses, mid-sized businesses, and the leasing of commercial space, office, industrial, retail. We also do a very high volume of residential closings and also represent a number of condominium and cooperative boards in Brooklyn and Queens. And it's interesting just because I mentioned the residential, as everyone has seen, residential markets have taken off. A lot of the clients who come our way have actually stemmed from residential work. Turns out, a number of people who buy and sell homes and apartments, they have businesses of their own, and so that work has led to additional work in representing both tenants and landlords. I've been practicing for about 15 years. I previously worked at some of the biggest firms in Manhattan and worked as in-house counsel for one of Manhattan's biggest real estate developers. And then I progressively got smaller as I wanted to help real clients who need their attorneys and don't need a team, a team of 7 attorneys to work on one deal. Someone who, when you call, you get an answer. When you email, you get an answer, and to feel like someone is there fighting for you, preserving your trust, and recognizing what your interests and needs are as a practical business person and company in the New York City area. So I think we're going to team off of each other, play off of each other in terms of this PowerPoint. I guess, Brady, you could go to the next slide. So when you enter into any commercial leases, most of you probably know there's a couple of different parties who are involved. Okay, so the real estate broker is really he's keying everything off. He's that person who's guiding guiding the client, who will be the tenant, to other parties. Oftentimes, typically an attorney, sometimes an architect, and or a contractor. Usually, a client is coming with their own accountant, sometimes their own insurance agent. But it's just important to recognize some of the different parties and what their roles are, because a commercial lease can become a very sophisticated transaction with a number of different moving parts. And so I'll let Rich in just a little bit go into more specifics of how he adds value. But let me just give it kind of a broad overview, because a real estate broker is going to come in and tell you what your business terms are and set you a reasonable expectation for the type of space that you should be getting and the price that you should be paying, any type of concessions that landlords should be giving, any types of additional rent that you should be paying in addition to, let's say, a base rent of a fixed amount per month. They will know that what are the market terms. And remember, in the city of New York, you can have all these different submarkets. Long Island City and Astoria industrial market can be different than, you know, Southwest Brooklyn. And I'll let Rich touch on that, but it's super important to have a broker who understands those nuances and knows what those different types of business terms are in those areas. And so also these deals will usually have very particular insurance requirements. I put insurance agent here because a lot of times people, you know, you start a business, especially I would say smaller businesses. It's not like these big firms that you see on Wall Street who are losing money for 10 years and are funded by some imaginary bank somewhere. You know, if you're not making money, if you can't pay your expenses, you're not in business. So what oftentimes happens, you want to get the best deal for yourself. And so shopping around insurance is important. A lot of times going straight to like a State Farm or an Allstate on a commercial lease could be dangerous. There are very specific types of coverages. Landlords will require minimum amounts. They'll typically require umbrella policies, and there may be exclusions in your policy depending upon the amount that you're paying, which could ultimately be a problem for the landlord down the road, or you as well if your insurance doesn't cover. So enough to say that making sure you have a broker who can shop to a couple of different carriers and understand some of the nuances and complexities on leases, that's very important. Okay, an architect or an engineer can also be very important, especially if you're doing some type of build out of your space. And you want to get these parties involved as early as possible. The insurance you can get maybe sometimes a little bit later, but the architect or engineer, you know, if you're looking at leasing the space and you know you're going to have a build out that's going to take you 2 months to build, and you're going to need to pull permits and pull plans, you want your engineer to have experience in building out your type of space, right? And remember, different businesses have different needs. You know, there can be some industrial types of businesses, for example, that need that will need some sort of refrigeration. You've got food, right? Or you're baking and you need to exhaust out. You need some sort of venting out of the property in order to have whatever ovens and equipment that you need there. So you have to understand and make sure that your engineer is looking at that and running numbers with you so you can plan ahead. And those plans, and depending upon what you're doing, will also could have ramifications and impacts on your business terms of what's in the lease, and you know, also your legal terms of what are in the lease too. And we'll talk about some of the differentiation between business and legal terms in just a bit. You also want to make sure that you have your accountant on board. A lot of landlords, they're going to want to see financial statements for the company, because they want to know if they're entering into whatever the period of lease is, 5-year or a 5-year with a 5-year renewal, or a 10-year lease, whatever the term is, do you have enough money to pay the rent? And then additionally, we can talk about this a little bit later, who's going to be guaranteeing the obligations of the tenant in the event that the tenant doesn't have money, okay, which is a key consideration in every lease. And typically landlords are going to want to see some sort of financial statement, including tax returns of the individual or the principal or parent company who is guaranteeing the obligations of the tenant. Okay, and there's a lot to unpack there. We're definitely not going to be able to do that in the limited time span of this workshop. But the good news is that we'll have another one where we can talk a little bit more about that. The last party is the attorney. Okay, so your attorney's job, whether it's me or anyone else, is to understand what the terms that you're agreeing to are, okay? And to make sure that those business and legal terms that your broker and you negotiate get memorialized in the lease, because ultimately it's the lease that will be the legal document that dictates what your rights, obligations, and responsibilities are. And same thing with the landlord over the term of the lease, however long it is. And it's your attorney's job to, you know, set your expectation so you understand what it is that you're getting into, right? You know, a transactional attorney is different than a litigator, right? You know, a litigator comes in at the end and they're there sometimes really to clean up a mess or to solve a problem once stuff has gotten bad. Your transactional attorney on a lease is there to think about worst case situations, how different situations can play out, to solve problems in advance so that you to minimize problems 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. And when, you know, minimizing problems, you know, problems that cost you money, problems that cost you time, or you know, other types of expenses, right? So that's generally, you know, I would say, you know, broad overview of, you know, who's doing what, and I'll let Rich take it from here.
Yep, thanks for that, Justin. Yeah, so if we get to the next slide, once you guys, you know, once a company kind of understand, you know, realizes that they need a new space, whether they're expanding or their lease is expiring and they're moving into a, you know, a larger space, or maybe they have a large space and they're downsizing and right sizing, whatever the case may be, they pull together that team. They kind of understand their push points and what they need. And then say they've selected a broker. And the broker is basically going to have, you know, all of the knowledge and kind of understanding of the markets, which we kind of put together in our market beats, we call them, or sort of a state of the market. Most large brokerages will publish these reports. If any of you want any of these reports sent to you, you know, I've all of the reports from last year. We're in March now, so I'm basically deferring back to the Q4 report from 2021, kind of giving you an overview of the end of last year. And we'll run through this. We don't have Q1 published yet, but if anybody would like that, just email me or call me and let me know. I'm happy to kind of get you guys those reports. We also have some other snapshots and scorecards, we call them, that we could send to you as well, that kind of outline some trends. So on you know, the industrial story top line over the course of the last 5 years or so, and certainly, you know, pricing's been getting high, you know, it's been getting more expensive throughout the boroughs. You know, vacancy rates have been going down, occupancy's been going up, everything's been getting tighter. A lot of our retail has been moving online. So therefore, you know, the warehousing and distribution and logistics sectors have been like kind of going crazy. And then the pandemic hits and it kind of takes it from crazy to like madness. And we're seeing like the tightest industrial real estate markets we've kind of ever seen in the boroughs. It's being alleviated by a few, you know, there's a few projects coming up that are being developed, which I'll just touch on as well. But at the end of the day, most of our product in the boroughs is, you know, older product, mom and pop driven, family office owned. But we're starting to see a change in that as well. So let me just kind of read some of the basic points here on this slide, and I'll just kind of go off of that and speak to those. So on our economy as a whole, our local economy trends positively as the city eases restrictions from the pandemic, right? So the unemployment rate for New York City outer boroughs has been steadily falling for more than a year. And then it goes into say our strong retail and online sales coupled with elevated consumer confidence has helped fuel local industrial markets across the nation. So as I said, those sectors have been you know, on fire. And moving into you know, last mile logistics and last mile delivery. So industrial is really servicing more of the retail, as well as another thing I'll say is sort of like through the pandemic, lots of people have been home, right? Redoing their homes, redoing their landscaping, redoing all sorts of projects. So besides like logistics and e-com, the construction industry and any sort of related industries, stone, all those supply companies for roofing and construction and building supplies are also always looking for space and looking to expand, and that's another sector that's kind of driving this. So jumping to supply and demand, our occupancy reaches historical highs, right? So our vacancy rates have been at historical lows. Despite the Omicron variant and supply chain disruptions, New York City outer boroughs industrial market posted a strong finish to 2021. As net absorption surpassed 1 million square feet, vacancy fell to a recent historic low borough-wide of 3.7%, and asking rents have jumped up 3.2% since the previous quarter to $20.60 per square foot. Jumping to the end of the paragraph, logistics users remained on the hunt for last mile delivery facilities throughout the marketplace, while traditional warehousing and storage companies continued to absorb small and mid-sized spaces. The need for surface parking in the outer boroughs remains strong as e-com and logistic companies in New York seek more space for their vacant vehicles to park. So that's another interesting trend to touch on. Prices for land next to a building or a lot 5 years ago might have been $8 to $10 a square foot on a taking rent. Might have asked 10 to 12 bucks and get taken $8, $9, $10 a foot. Now we're seeing parking they're asking $16, $18 a foot for parking, associated parking or a lot. We've seen certain national and global companies like the FedExes, the DHLs, the UPSs, the Amazons paying north of $20 for surface parking because they had to be in a certain location, which is more than most markets would pay for a building or space under roof, as we call it. So it's kind of the numbers have gone pretty crazy pretty recently for parking. So the last thing I'll touch on is construction. Healthy development pipeline and strong rent growth will continue into 2022. Much of the 3 million square feet of projects under construction now is available for lease and should add some much needed Class A supply to the marketplace as new logistics facilities continue to be in demand for e-com and third-party logistics and logistics companies to the outer boroughs. Asking and taking rents specifically for modern logistics space and new construction should continue to grow and should remain among the highest in the country. Pricing for new construction will be at a premium over the remainder of the marketplace as existing Class A space is virtually non-existent. Now, I guess, in all fairness, most of the folks on the call are probably, not the Amazons and the FedEx and are going to be paying the top line $30 a square foot for new logistics space. But just to speak to the types of spaces that are out there, when we see, if we look on the left-hand side of the slide, we see our average asking rent of $20.60 per foot in the borough, which is up year over year, and they see that it's going to trend upwards over the next 12 months. But that's a weighted average, taking into account all types of space, Class A, B, and C, all types of floors, manufacturing space versus high ceiling logistics space. So what I typically see in Brooklyn and in Sunset Park, Gowanus, and in Red Hook specifically is, you see anything from, the upper teens echelon all the way up to the new product where they're asking $35 a foot for purpose-built space and everything in between. So your family office and your mom and pop landlords and your, kind of ground floor, lower ceiling, 14, 15, 16 foot ceiling spaces are probably all asking, in the low to mid 20s, right? And taking rents 20 to 22 bucks. What brings that up are the Amazons and the UPSs and the DHLs who are paying $30 for Class A space. And what brings that down are groups, quite frankly, in the Brooklyn Army Terminal, where I've probably done 20 or 30 leases over the last couple of years of like, space that is as is space that we release, and the city isn't really doing any work to it, but we're offering out space on a $15 a foot ask and doing taking deals at $13, $14 a foot for manufacturers with dense job counts on upper floors. So that's all industrial space taken into this weighted average of $20.60 a foot. So just to give you a sense of the bottom of the market versus the top of the market. And it's kind of interesting also that, over the last couple of years in the industrial sector, we've really seen a rise in sales to institutions and institutional money and institutional ownership, REITs, of the larger scale businesses that they can kind of, buy a warehouse in these neighborhoods. Like there was a sale on 54th Street in Sunset Park to Segis property. Segis, bought it from a family office. They, the family office, if they did no improvements on that building, might have asked $22, $23, but Segis bought it. They did a whole slew of improvements, new lighting, new flooring, new doors, upgraded electric, new windows, and white boxed it and put in new bathrooms, right? And their asking rent was $28 a foot triple net, which when you're comparing apples to apples, that ends up being over $30 a foot. But they got a deal close to that because it's an institutional ownership who's going to provide a turnkey space, as opposed to a local owner who's going to give you the space and give you a few months free on your rent and expect you to handle everything else. So that's what you gotta like look out for when you're going to lease space, is what type of ownership you're gonna be getting into a relationship with on a lease over the next 5 or 10 years or whatever it might be. So I guess top line on this page, like our vacancy rate on the top left is the basic story of the borough and these neighborhoods specifically. We're at 3.7% borough wide year over year, and it's been suppressed. And over the last, over the next 12 months, Cushman and Wakefield, as part of their research department, we see that not really changing. It's only going to they think it's going to remain the same. I think we can hit the next slide now. So if we just look at this for a bit, I know it's might be a little small, not to read. So we have Brooklyn lumped in with the Bronx, Queens, and Staten Island. This just gives you a snapshot of like the amount of buildings, the amount of inventory on the market, and what the year-to-date leasing activity has been in millions of square feet in each borough. So in Brooklyn, we have 800 buildings with 52 million square feet of inventory in them, roughly. We've seen about 800,000 square feet of leases in the past year. This is for 2021. The overall vacancy rate in Brooklyn, 4%. So that's close to what the last page said at 3.7%, thereabouts. And then we get into absorption and what's under construction. 436,000 square feet is under construction of new space. And our weighted overall average on the right-hand side is $20.68. And this is reflective of like below it's warehousing and distribution space versus high technology and flex space and manufacturing space. So all those factors and all those types of industrial spaces are weighed into these averages. We have a few key lease transactions. You can see the types of tenancy at these spaces. Decatur, Rockaway Boulevard, and 46th Street, sort of on the borough. It's more, those happen to be more in Queens, but a couple of those are right on the border. But it's the DHLs and Ready Spaces. It's interesting. Ready Spaces is this new company that took 90,000 square feet. Decatur Street, I believe, is in Ridgewood, right across from Bushwick, and they took 90,000 square feet in a multi-story building, and what they do is like there's a couple other companies doing this now, and they're basically looking to be sort of, it's interesting, like WeWork's for a WeWork type of model. I don't know about the membership, but more about the shared office space and the managed office space. They're looking to do it with industrial space for smaller users, like multi-story buildings with good vertical transportation. they'll take that 90,000 square feet and break it up into, a loading platform down with a shared loading, and then they'll bust it up into smaller units with flexible lease terms. So you don't have to take a 5 or 10 year lease. Maybe you can take a 6-month lease, or you got product coming in and coming out for 3 months, and you need 5,000 square feet, or you need a year or two. Like it's an interesting model that's the office model is now spilled over into industrial, because we see so many of these new businesses and all these new e-commerce and Shark Tank types of businesses popping up. It's interesting. We should keep our eyes on those types of users moving forward. And then we note some projects under construction and sales. Grand Avenue and Mass Bath RXR. So as I was talking about, you have a lot of the mom and pops on these smaller 5, 10, 15, 20,000 square foot warehouses. But like, as you can see under construction, you got 55 to 15 Grand Avenue, which is right next to East Williamsburg. It's actually in Mass Bath. RXR, which is one of the largest developers in the country, is building 770,000 square feet of multi-story industrial. 2505 Bruckner Boulevard, Anovo and Square Mile. Those guys have been on fire. They're building a huge project right off of the Bronx River Parkway. That one is for 690,000 square feet. And these are all speculative. Like, they would never have done this in the past if the industrial market was not as robust as it is right now. And then there's another one out in Queens, 400,000 square feet with Triangle Equities. But in our neck of the woods, we have a couple of projects like 640 Columbia Street and 55 Bay over in Red Hook. Those were taken by Amazon. And those are some of the built suits for the larger companies in our neck of the woods. I guess some of the leasing velocity and activity that we want to hear about, I guess, in our area that we're focusing on is, Industry City, buildings like Industry City, 850 3rd Avenue, Liberty View Plaza, that has Bed Bath & Beyond in it, and then the Army Terminal as well. Working at the Army Terminal, I see when I'm doing tours of tenants coming down to the terminal, it speaks to the differences in types of buildings and types of ownerships and what a company might be looking for, right? So like, if we take those 3 buildings on the water in Sunset Park, I run leasing at the Army Terminal. I know that it's a city-owned property. It has to be manufacturing. We have to have jobs. I know our limitations, but I know that if you qualify, it's going to be the cheapest deal in Brooklyn, because we can offer properties at $15 to $18 a foot on the ask and a couple of bucks less on the take. You're gonna have no taxes. You're gonna get parking, and there's no real like upcharges or union operated elevators. It's all managed by the tenants, so it's the cheapest deal. Whereas, if a company wants a bit more of like the retail vibe and some like robust campus atmosphere, they're gonna probably want to pay up and spend and choose the other buildings, which I understand. Everybody has to know their properties and their markets and their limitations. So like, Industry City, I take tenants over there as well. So I've done tenant deals at Industry City. They have, it's gonna be a higher price point, but you're gonna have like the most incredible, retailers and food options and amenities for who's coming to that campus. So it depends on what you're looking for. And then I like, Liberty View Plaza, 850 3rd Avenue is, I think, somewhere in between. And they have great space there. Their industrial space there. They ask like $23 a foot. They're probably doing deals plus or minus $20, $21. And just to continue on that note, I have a couple of groups. So 850 3rd Avenue, Liberty View Plaza just recently did a bunch of deals. They were slow for a little while, but like in the past few months, they had a group called Care Of take 79,000 square feet. They're an e-commerce user and like a wellness pharmacy type of user, direct to consumer. What's interesting, Care Of's office came out of Manhattan and they merged with their logistics center that bumped up their square footage, and they're combining to take 79,000 square feet of industrial space with their office in it at 850 3rd Avenue. There's another company called G Hair, which does wigs. They took 9,100 square feet there for showroom and warehousing and storage. There's a company called Pros over there as well. They bumped up their square footage to 42,000 square feet from 29,000 on a renewal. And what's interesting is Pros also, so they took their logistics center and bumped that up at 850 3rd Avenue. But while they did that, they also moved their headquarters from Manhattan out into Williamsburg. So now they're a full Brooklyn company, office and industrial. An interesting deal recently at Industry City was Porsche and Volvo last year, mid to end of last year, took 20 or 30,000 square feet for a service center and showroom. So, you know, we've seen a few other car companies and electric car companies as well kicking around in all sorts of markets in Brooklyn and down in Sunset Park. So there's high-end, you know, gas-driven and electric vehicles out in the market looking for space. That's an interesting deal over there. And then down at the Army Terminal, you know, our last recent deals, I did a 37,500 square foot deal with an HVAC contractor called Rams Mechanical. They do a lot of city contracts, and they needed to expand from their facility in Queens. So they took 37,500 square feet, and they manufacture and build their own systems and ductwork. Then we had a woodworker take about 20,000 square feet up on the 8th floor recently, and then we're about to finish a deal with a screen printing company for about 15,000 square feet. And again, all these groups are manufacturing users and bringing jobs to the Sunset Park area, which is what everybody's sort of looking for.
Sorry, can you guys still see my screen, or did it switch?
It switched to like the first.
Sorry,
first
sometimes
okay.
I lose the. Let me see. Okay, there we go.
I know I don't want to go on too long, but
Yeah.
just some emerging. So just to kind of recap and top line some emerging trends that we've been seeing is, you know, the increased need for parking around the borough, from the large guys to the contractors to parking has been, it's almost non-existent and getting super expensive. So if you can get parking with your space, that's a premium. Arrival of institutional ownership in the industrial sector in the boroughs has been another one over the past couple of years, certainly since the pandemic. They're gobbling up space and turning it over and improving it. And then the impact of e-com on every type of product, especially industrial. Those would be the main sort of trends over the past year or so. And then lastly, like in the Gowanus, Sunset Park, Red Hook area, a couple other bits of information. So during Q4 in 2021, South Brooklyn accounted for 54% of the leasing activity for industrial space in Brooklyn. During Q4 2021, South Brooklyn accounted for 17% of the leasing among all the boroughs. Overall asking rents in Q4 2021 in South Brooklyn specifically was $22.22 per square foot compared to the $20.68 for overall Brooklyn. So it's a little bit higher than the rest of Brooklyn by a couple of bucks. And that could be due to some of those last mile logistic Amazon deals that drove prices higher. And the overall vacancy rate is right around 3.7% to 4.0%. So those are sort of, you know, that's sort of the kind of market in a nutshell. We could take some questions at the end, but if we can hit the next slide, I'll just transition. And this is a little, it's what I could find. Excuse the cartoon-ish aspect of these slides, but it's basically, I just wanted to reiterate you know, there was a lot of information I just went through, and there's a lot more information that you could deep dive into in all of that. And being a new business or a business who's expanding, it's a lot to navigate. I was telling these guys earlier, we were talking, you know, I do office and industrial focus a lot more recently on the industrial, but like if someone needed 10,000 square feet of office space and asked a broker to run a survey for them, they could probably see 30 properties, pull together 30 locations in a day, because office space is available and at an all-time, the vacancy rates are at an all-time high. But industrial spaces, vacancy rates are at an all-time low. So you might see 30 office spaces, but if you're looking for 10,000 square feet of industrial, you might get 2 or 3 spaces that work. So you might have to think outside the box, or you might have to look at leases expiring towards the end of the year and contact owners directly, or utilize your relationships to get off-market deals. So you got to kind of hit it from all aspects. So I just wanted to review whether it was myself or somebody else at another firm. If you're a tenant in the market in the industrial space, everybody should have a broker. It really, these are sort of some of the reasons why, because obviously since we know our product, we're going to protect our tenants, right? If you have a tenant rep broker, they're working and aligned with you and your, needs and goals. And they have a fiduciary responsibility to get you the best deal. And then what we would do is we create competition in the market, right? So once an owner or a landlord knows that you're in the market with a broker, they know that you're going to be seeing all the spaces that are available, and that a broker is willing and wants to put out paper and term sheets and LOIs on multiple properties to kind of come back and see where they're going to get the best deal. Whereas if you're on your own, you're probably just dealing with that owner directly, not really knowing what else might be out there in the market. And number 3, saves time. Obviously, as a business, you guys should be focused on what you're doing and what you know best, and let somebody who does it all day, every day for a living and is good at what they do save you time. That's what you're getting in engaging a broker. If we can jump to the next slide. So we're finding the right space, right? So we're understanding your needs, having meetings with you, seeing your space prior to understanding ceiling heights, power requirements, floating, also, transportation for your workers and things like that to uncover and find you the right space that ticks all your boxes. And then we create surveys and we track surveys. We keep all of our records on file so that we kind of create an orderly process. We're going to maximize the benefits due to our comprehensive market knowledge. That's kind of speaks for itself and everything I just talked about. And we'll advise objectively and listen to your pain points and understand, something that not everybody's the same, right? So you want to have the right broker, because some folks are just in there just to make a deal, and some folks are in there because they want a relationship and more business from doing a good job for the tenants. So they have to take everything into consideration, and if it's not the right deal, keep looking and keep digging. So those are basically some of the reasons that anyone and everybody who's in the market should have a broker. The last thing I will say that's not on here: if you have a tenant rep broker in commercial real estate and a deal and a transaction gets done, the landlords pay the broker. The landlord would pay their own broker on the landlord side, and they also pay the tenant rep broker. So that's that 8th reason. You get a ton of service through all of this without ever really having to come out of pocket for anything. All you need to do is just align yourself with a broker, engage them with their agreements, filter everything through them, and then you get all of this service. And when you do transact, that broker gets paid by the landlord. So it's kind of silly not to have one, in my opinion, with everything that's kind of been said and everything that needs to get navigated. With that, I will flip it over to Justin, and he can take you through, once we find the right space and negotiate the right term sheet, which we'll go through on the next one. We bring in the attorney once we get the lease to kind of go through that. So Justin will take it from here and kind of take it through what they do at that point.
Sure, and I know we're coming up close to our time limit, so I'm going to try and go quickly. But I wanted to highlight some of the things that Rich said. The second point on there, evaluating the strength and risk profile of the parties. Rich did a great job of talking about who are your different types of landlords that are out there. Are they institutional real estate players, or are they mom and pop owners. So let's just dive into a mom and pop owner. It could be a material man or a tradesman who historically had a business there, and then they retire. Let's say they sold their business and then just kept the space, and now their son runs it. Okay, and there's a lot of that. There's more of that than what people may think. Because when you're driving, you're driving throughout the city of New York. A lot of times you're focusing on the big stuff. You see the big giant warehouse or the Amazon sign or something like that. But there are a lot of industrial properties that are owned by smaller, as Rich mentioned, family offices and individual owners. And that makes a very big difference when you're negotiating a lease. Okay. These things can go from 0 to 60 very quickly. But it also matters, who those parties are, because you have to understand what their needs are. It's looking at everything in the totality of the circumstances. Yes, you have a hot market, maybe that owner also, that owner has a mortgage and very high real estate taxes, where they really need to get a tenant in. And then who's their attorney and what kind of lease did they send me? I'll have times where, believe it or not, you can have a lease at like $20,000 a month, and it's a 20-page lease. Other times you can get that same type of space, and you have a 100-page lease, and it's coming from a law firm with 100 attorneys there, and you're never getting a hold of the person. They only answer emails. You can't get them on the phone. I had a client who had rented a space from a bank who had taken over for previous owner. And so, the landlord's attorney basically said, okay, we will give you 5 things. So pick your 5 points that you want to negotiate on this lease. And so that is important, because you then have to understand how much rope you have, what's your breaking point, what are your things that you can give on and what you can't give on. And a good broker is also going to prepare the client before they come to their attorney, and that is important, so you're not wasting time and you're not wasting money. And the other thing, these 2 other points, and these are bigger picture points. Okay, evaluating the strength and the risk profile of parties, super important in any negotiation. Building and preserving trust. Okay, the attorney is typically where the rubber meets the road. When you're signing a lease, you're also handing over typically your first month's rent and your security deposit. So you're ponying up at that time, and so it's your attorney's job to understand what it is that you're agreeing to, and knowing what your ultimate needs are. And so there's certain times that facts can come into play there. So you may be in a space right now, and you're negotiating a surrender, and then you're also building out the new space, and timing how you're leaving the old space and getting into the new space is a juggling act. And making sure that you have an attorney who understands that and knows when to speed things up or slow things down, and to work with the broker as well about that. Maybe delaying a commencement date, and to understand if there's 10 other offers on the table, and they're going to go with somebody else fairly quickly, but this is the best deal in the market, then maybe it makes sense for that particular client to, let's say, pay an extra month's rent, because it will be worth it for them in the long term. And a good attorney is going to think through that practically and understand what the needs are. And that helps to build and preserve the trust, right? It tells the client that the attorney is not representing the landlord, they're not representing the broker, they're representing the client. Allowing the brokers to negotiate the business terms and the attorneys to negotiate the legal terms. That is super important. People have heard the term staying in your lane. Okay. That is very important. It's also important to play nice in the playground or in the sandbox. And there can be instances that come up, and I've had this arise. I'll just give an example. This wasn't, this was a retail lease, but a client was renting a space and he was out of town and he had several other businesses in New York. And so he had seen the floor plan. The broker had taken him on a cell phone tour of the space, liked everything. And then he actually showed up, or I think he might have had his manager show up and went to the basement. There was a huge vermin problem and an infestation problem in the basement. He goes, not only was he going to have to take care of that, but he had to change some of the plumbing downstairs and change the expenses of what his build out was going to be. So he told me to go tell the landlord to, when I send my comments over, to add an additional 2 months of free rent. So, well, I can't do that. I mean, that's changing a business term. You've got to go back to your broker and talk about why that business term has changed. Because if it comes from the attorney, it changes the context and the tone of the negotiation. And people can change on a dime, and it can change, and the deal can change on a dime for a variety of reasons. One, factual, two, someone else comes in off the street and all of a sudden he's got a better offer, or let's say not as good of an offer, but he's willing to take a different concessions. So understanding when you're getting the right parties involved is super important. So let's go to the next slide. Well, I see we're really running short on time. So because I want to leave a couple of minutes for Q&A. But these are just a couple of really important things. The term sheet is a roadmap for the lease, okay? And the broker is going to put in a whole bunch of terms into a term sheet. What are the base rent? What kind of additional rent is the tenant paying? Typically, there'll be an increase of the real estate taxes over a base year, depending upon your proportionate interest in the overall property. So if you have a 15% of the space, you're paying an increase over a base year of 15% of what that increase is of the real estate taxes in the base year. And I know I went very quickly on that because there were a couple of other points I wanted to go through. But making sure that those business terms get incorporated into the lease, that's important. Why? You'd be surprised at the number of times that what's written in the term sheet is not actually what gets written in the lease. And that could happen for any number of reasons. There could be an associate who's working on the lease and he doesn't get the memo from the partner, he's junior and doesn't understand it. You could have several drafts of that term sheet go around and someone gets an earlier draft. Okay, you can have things that will change like that. It's the attorney's job to advise about risk and liability. Okay, so understanding, what are examples of unacceptable risk? I had a client one time who was going to rent the space. The broker sends it out. We pull up the DOB website. There's no certificate of occupancy. You're going to rent the space with no C of O. Well, by the way, it's a defense to paying rent. But even though you could potentially win in court for not paying rent, to not have to pay rent, you've now spent thousands of dollars moving your business here, and you're going to take the risk of the city coming down to shut down your business. That is an unacceptable level of risk. Okay. We really don't have that much time. I want to, there's differences between business risk and legal risk. What are you paying in terms of like a price per square foot? Or what type of concession are you getting from the landlord to build out the space? Is the landlord building out the space, or are you getting 3 months of free rent? And if you're getting three months of free rent and you're doing the work, the landlord is going to typically want to see what your plans are. What are those approval and consent rights? What are the timing and the nature of the logistics for submitting those plans, so that you don't have a kink in your chain to where you can't start your business for an extra month or 2 months down the line? Those can have real impacts on a business. And those are important things that an attorney should look at in the lease. Also understanding what are the landlord's responsibility to maintain versus the tenant's responsibility. Broadly speaking, landlords are responsible for structural repairs, things like the roof, Tenant is going to be responsible for what's inside the space. Let's say electrical. And understanding the timeline, logistics, and the cash flow. Like, when are you coming up with that security? When are you paying that, your first month's rent if there's an abatement? Okay, and understanding that, because those can have certain cash flow impacts, especially if you're paying money to your contractors and engineers to build out a space. We could go into a whole lot longer details. I think when we do our next series,
Yeah,
we'll go into more of those details. But maybe we can go over for 5 minutes or so if anyone's got any Q&A.
Yeah, I put on the chat just to have anyone has any questions. I don't know if can you guys see the poll
No.
that we put? No.
No.
Let me see. Maybe if I end the poll, share results. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, some interesting information for you guys. Have you leased industrial space in the past year? We have a mixed answer here. Is your industrial lease expiring in the next 18 months? We have a couple people with expirations upcoming. Are you actively looking for industrial space now? Everyone in this call, or most everyone who answered the poll, is looking for industrial space now. So, yeah.
So you guys are in the right place.
So yeah, we're almost on time.
I'm good on time if anybody has questions.
Yeah, same. We can go a little bit over.
It's important to know these things they're not easy, right? This is not like figuring out a game of Connect 4. It can get very involved. So having the right parties who know how to work with one another, make the right referrals, and lead you to the right places. And we've all seen situations. I'm sure Rich has seen situations with bad attorneys. I've seen situations with brokers who their knowledge level is really substandard, and you get a term sheet, and the term sheet is three things on the term sheet,
Right.
and then it makes more work for the attorney. And by the way, you're
more money for you.
Right, more money for the client.
Right.
And so you want to try and solve problems proactively and to think about what the issues are going to be. And work with your teams to avoid the problems later or mitigate the risk.
Yeah, you want your term sheet to be kind of as robust as possible and cover as many things as you can, like you said, to cut down on what the attorneys have to do to translate that into the lease, and also just to understand that certain things might blow up or not blow up prior to going to lease. So if you covered it and negotiated it in the LOI, you kind of that's what should be standing and not retrading in the lease.
Retrading is a great term.
We could go over retrading as part of the next one, I think, when we go to the term sheet.
Totally. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. We have Rich and Justin's email on the screen also. If folks want to reach out directly and have any questions or are interested in their services. Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Feel free to call or email.
Totally.
If you don't want to speak on this forum, just call me directly.
Totally. That was an amazing overview also about the market. I even have some questions that I'll be probably following up with you guys. And yeah, Brady, anything on your side?
Yeah, and just stay tuned, as Justin and Rich mentioned, for the next part of this series, diving a little deeper into the term sheet and some of these other issues. We'll kind of get information on that in the coming months. And so thank you again to Rich and Justin. It's a really informative session. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone on the call did as well. And then just a reminder that the final part of this Stabilize to Thrive webinar series, next Tuesday, if you want to join, with our very own Michaela Skochnik, who you've heard from SBIDC, and she's going to be providing some guidance on financing for early stage businesses. So thanks again, everyone, for joining today. You've got Justin and Rich's contact info, and hope you have a good rest of the day. Thanks, everyone.
Great.
Bye, everyone.
All right.
See you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, Justin.
Yep.
Michaela.
Likewise, Rich.
Bye.
Bye.
You know, Brady, one thing you may just